All right, good evening, everyone. I've given the preliminary, and then we are going to start our meeting. It is 6:30, and we have a little bit of feedback.
Sound like this.
While they're fixing that, let's say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance. As soon as we get our primary executive director, assistant here, we will start roll call. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm so sorry. Okay. Let's do it. All right, someone's working on it. Apologies in advance, everyone. Okay, Julie Duran Mulca, Adams County. Kathy Henson, Adams County. Jeff Baker, Arapahoe County.
Here.
Thank you. Claire Levy, Boulder County. Ashley Stolzman, Boulder County. Austin Ward, City and County, Broomfield.
Here.
Rebecca Lloyd, Clear Creek County. Jody Hartman Ball, Clear Creek County. Adam Paul, City and County of Denver. Nicholas Williams, City and County of Denver. Kevin Flynn, Denver. Chantel Lewis, Denver. Kevin Van Wiekle, Douglas County. Abe Layden, Douglas County. Susan Behrman, Gilpin County. Andy Kerr, Jefferson County. Rachel Zenzinger, Jefferson County. Arvada, Sharon Davis. Thank you. Allison Coombs, Aurora. Rob Andrews, Aurora. Royce Pindell, Bennett. Chris Clemens, Bennett.
Here.
David Spellman, Blackhawk. Nicole Spear, Boulder. Greg Mills, Brighton.
Happy summer.
Thank you. Deborah Mulvey, Castle Pines. What is okay. Thank you. Jason Gray, Castle Rock. Tim Dietz, Castle Rock. Christine Sweetland, Centennial. Ashish Vaida, Centennial. Zane Plasek, Central City. Robert Eber, Cherry Hills Village. Charles Jukes, Commerce City. Michelle Rogers, Dacono. Adam Moorhead, Dacono. Steve Conklin, Edgewater. Jack Bethel, Inglewood. Oh, thank you. Emily Bayer, Erie. Brandon Bell. Oh, Emily. Yep, good. All right. Linda Montoya, Federal Heights. Don Cognac, Firestone. Josie Cockrell, Foxfield. Lisa Jones, Foxfield. Wendy Padilla, Frederick. Georgia Kofed, Georgetown. Rachel Binkley, Glendale. Brian Toucher, Glendale. Gerhard Fow, Golden. Here. George Lance, Greenwood Village. Sorry. Chuck Harmon, Idaho Springs. Saul Tapia Vega, Lafayette. Kyle Beaulieu, Lafayette. Oh my God, sorry guys. Deslin Shahrazai, Lakewood. Present. Got it. Isaac Levy, Larkspur. Robert Reichard, Littleton. Kyle Schlachter, Littleton. Kat Bristow, Lockbuoy. Larry Strock, Lockbuoy. Alicia Brown, Lone Tree. Here. Matthew Popkin, Longmont. Susie Hidalgo Faring, Longmont. Judy Curran, Louisville. Present. Jen Wingard, Lyons. Colleen Whitlow, Meade. Present. Angela Bernhard, Morrison. Here. Kathleen Bailey, Mountain View. Here. Nicole Sterling, Netherland. Richard Kondo, North Glen.
Here.
John Dyack, Parker. Jay Whitaker, Sheridan.
Here.
Thank you. Lee Bernardo, Silver Plume. Neil Shaw, Superior. Mike Foster, Superior. Justin Martinez, Thornton. Roberta Ayala, Thornton. Sarah Nermella, Westminster. Rachel Hulteen, Wheat Ridge. Darius Pakba, CDOT.
Here.
Sally Chafee, CDOT. Kiernan Maletsky, RTD. All right, and with that, Madam Chair, we do have a quorum, and thank you to whoever fixed the echo.
It was Lakewood, by the way.
So I want to make sure that we have Director Andrews, who is with us virtually today. Let's see if he's on. I didn't hear him to.
He is.
Okay.
I will promote him now.
Okay. And then, Rachel Brinkley, I know she's here. So thank you all, everyone, for joining us on such a cool day in July.
Yeah.
I'd like to recognize new members tonight. Jen Wingard from Town of Lyons. Royce, welcome. Royce Pindell from the Town of Bennett, former alternate. Alicia Brown, City of Lone Tree, is now the member. It was a former alternate. New alternate, Susan Wood from City of Wheat Ridge. Marissa Harmon used to be our member. Now she's a former member. She'll remember. It says right here, former member. Former member. Now she's the alternate. I'm just greeting. Don't mind me. And Chris Clemens from the Town of Bennett, a new alternate. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. All right, and let's get going. We'll turn it over to, I need a motion to approve the agenda. Thank you. Is there a second? Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we'll move on. Report of the chair. Thank you very much. I'm going to enjoy my birthday with you all today, so thank you very much. And I will turn the podium over to our Performance and Engagement Committee Chair. Ma'am, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Performance and Engagement Committee met this evening, and we really focused on the upcoming award celebration on Wednesday, August 26th. You all should have a sheet at your seat that gives you information on how to register for that event, and also the opportunity to bring a guest at a reduced ticket price. Excited, I know some may pick up on this pattern. This is a stressful time of year for Doug as we get closer to the sponsorship goal, but this year we are excelling. The total sponsorship goal for 2026 was 90,000, and we heard from staff this evening that they're at 84,000. So very close. One thing that we are noticing just trend-wise, in 2025, we had 13 member cities sponsor the event. In 2024, we had 14 member governments sponsor the event. This year, we're at 6. So if that's something that your community is thinking about, if you are, you have a project that won an award, we'd love to encourage you to consider sponsorship this year, and looking forward to celebrating with you all in August. And that's it for me.
Thank you very much. We'll move over to the report of the Finance and Budget Committee. Chair, ma'am, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Finance budget did not meet, pardon me, this past time, and the next meeting will be August the 5th, and I'm really hoping that everyone can join us so we have a full quorum. Thank you.
Ma'am, I'll turn it over to our Executive Director for his report tonight.
Thank you, Madam Chair, very much. And again, happy birthday. That seems like that's something I should probably know. So that's a fault of mine. I got to figure that out.
Officials, we work on our birthday.
I'm sure you do. Yes, indeed. So thank you all so very much. Great seeing everybody again. It's been a while, so we appreciate seeing you all. A couple of recognitions. I want to recognize Commissioner Campbell from Arapahoe County. She's also joined us here tonight. Appreciate you being here. And also, I want to recognize security tonight. Abby couldn't make it, so Jonah Atchison is in the back of the room. Thank you, sir. I came on very short notice, so thank you. All righty, so coming to start off this evening, some good news. So on the MPO designation, we just received word yesterday that Governor Polis approved the expansion of the DRCOG Metropolitan Planning Organization planning boundary to include Gilpin and Clear Creek counties.
Welcome.
You might recall you all unanimously approved a resolution to expand the MPO boundary back at your April meeting. This is the first time DRCOG has revised or expanded the MPO boundary since 2007. So we're all excited to have both counties, which are already DRCOG members, of course, now officially join our transportation planning process. So thank you and appreciate you all and your help in getting this over the finish line. I also want to give you just not a heads up, but let you know that we were successful in, we were selected as a Phase 1 winner of the Administration for Community Living Health to Home Challenge. This challenge recognizes and awards advanced community care networks led by community care hubs, which DRCOG is one, and their healthcare partners that are working to improve health, independence, and affordability of care for duly eligible and near duly eligible Medicare and Medicaid beneficiaries. So we received $200,000 as part of Phase 1. This challenge concept is new to me, but if we advance further along in the stages, we get additional monies. Phase 2 is an additional $400,000. Phase 3 is additional something. So this was great news for us. It will be used primarily for navigation services for older adults in our region. So just stay tuned on some additional information on that. But that's wonderful news that we got it as well yesterday. Award celebration, Director Sherzai already mentioned this, but please try to attend this event. This is truly your event, and we have a great time. We have 500 plus people that attend this annually. I think if you haven't been before, just check with one of your board colleagues. I think they would strongly encourage you to do so. Table sponsorships are still available for those communities that are interested in doing that. I would like to thank those that have already partnered up. Arapahoe County, Brighton, Commerce City, Lakewood, Littleton, and Thornton have all purchased tables thus far. There is room for more. And again, as I mentioned before, it's a great opportunity to acknowledge staff and the work that they do, because it's obviously just not DRCOG staff that runs this thing, but a staff within your communities that make it all possible. So please consider sponsorship. Also, Bike to Work Day, we had another successful event. Participation was up by more than 10% over last year. Our Way to Go team helped organize more than 277 breakfasts and bike home stations across the region. The business challenge generated a lot of healthy competition across the region, with these organizations finishing first in their respective categories. Extra large employer was UC Health. Large employer, Ibotta. Is it Ibotta? Ibotta. Ibotta? Ibotta? Ibotta. Yes, tomato. Medium-sized employer, Electra Inc. in Boulder. Small employer, La Sportiva, Boulder. Sounds right. Extra small employer, Dig Studio in Denver. And we had great participation from member government as employers as well, including Boulder County, City County of Broomfield, City County of Denver, City of Arvada, Aurora, Boulder, Englewood, Lafayette, Lakewood, Littleton, Thornton, and the town of Castle Rock. So thank you all so very much for helping us generate another successful event. Also a big shout out to Director Sherzai and Prodigy Coffee for providing coffee and tea at our super station, which was down at Union Station this year. We appreciate you, and hosting several stations themselves. So we thank you very much for all your help. Some Powerhead Colorado updates is where it's fast and furious right now in the Powerhead program, and you'll hear a little bit about some of that work tonight. Heat pump rebates are now available. Powerhead Colorado has officially launched a new flat $1,500 rebate for qualifying cold climate heat pumps in the DRCOG region. Homeowners and businesses can stack the rebate with other available incentives to reduce upfront costs. Our energy advisors are here to help. No matter what your question or where you are in the process, they'll provide clear guidance and connect you with the right resources for your needs. You can reach out by phone or email today to get started. So we're really excited about this to finally, we've soft launched this over the last couple of weeks. The press really started, was it yesterday or today, Steve, you remember? Today, yeah. So we're excited to really get this going. It's a huge endeavor for us, just the infrastructure and establishing and getting this up and running. We're really excited about. So We'll get more information out to you all, and we want you to share with all your residents. This is a good opportunity if they're so inclined to participate. Colorado's first ever heat pump week, August 3rd through the 9th. We're leading and sponsoring the inaugural statewide heat pump week with fun activations throughout the week. Activities will include homeowners and businesses on the benefits of heat pumps and promote verified contractors. Campaign includes partnerships with utilities, local governments, distributors, contractors, workforce centers, and community organizations. Media kit and list of activities will be sent out on Friday, so your folks in your communities will be receiving that here shortly. Also in Powerhead, Colorado, we're well along on the round 2 jurisdictional support funding opportunities. I believe it closes, Greg, it closes in a week or so, end of the month. So if communities, if you had not participated in round 1 or you are interested in some supplementary funding, if you did apply for round 1 and receive funding, please get that in by the end of the month. I'm going to be reaching out to some communities and counties. I'm looking at mountain communities in particular to see if there might be an opportunity there for us to coordinate on something. So just stay tuned on that. Yeah, I think that's it, Madam Chair. That's my report.
Thank you very much. All right, next is public comment. Up to 45 minutes is allotted now for public comment, and each speaker will have it limited to 3 minutes. If there's any additional requests from the public to address the board, time will be allotted at the end of the meeting to complete public comment. Chair requests that there is no public comment on the issues for which a prior public hearing has been held before the board. Consent and action items will be immediately after the last speaker. Is there anyone here in the audience that would like to speak to the board of directors tonight? And move up and online.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a reminder, please raise your virtual hand if you'd like to participate in public comment this evening. And I don't see any hands raised.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to consent agenda. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda of summary May 20th, 2026, Innovation Pilot Grant Program, Human Services Transportation Set Aside, and selection of 5310 supplemental project recommendations and fiscal year 2025 transportation improvement from second year delays. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Now the consent agenda has been approved. We'll move on. Thank you very much, staff, for putting that together for us. Our first and only action item tonight is the discussion of the Build Policy Collaborative Roadmap. Greg Meow is the program manager for Powerhead, Colorado, and I will turn over the podium to him.
All right, can you hear me now? Great, thank you so much. Madam Chair, as she said, my name is Greg Meow. I am the program manager for the Building Policy Collaborative, which is one of the programs of Powerhead, Colorado. I am joined today virtually by our lead consultant for the BPC, Kim Schlafer, who's the Director of Climate Strategy and Sustainability at Lotus Sustainability Engineering. Kim, I just want to turn it over to you to see if you can join us. Introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Great. Yes, loud and clear.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Nice to be here. As Greg said, my name is Kim Schlafer, Managing Director at Lotus, and excited to be presenting some of the culmination of our work thus far with the Building Policy Collaborative.
Great. So very happy to be here today to bring forth an action item to approve the Building Policy Collaborative Roadmap. We had a brief chance during the last board workshop to discuss this, but because we didn't get to go too deeply into it, I thought I would share just a little bit more about what the roadmap is and what it does. Hopefully you had a chance to review it, but if not, here's the brief version. So the Building Policy Roadmap is really a visionary document that builds directly upon the previously approved comprehensive climate action plan, working to establish a vision for steadily reducing climate pollution from buildings across our region. It identifies near and long-term implementation-ready policies to reduce pollution and enhance efficiency of new construction and existing buildings while protecting the health and preserving housing affordability. So it is really a visionary document, kind of in the vein of a Vision Zero type document. We know our goals are ambitious, perhaps audacious, but they are worth identifying and worth working towards. And this document helps us both set that vision and identify the strategies that we think make the most sense to work our way towards them. Those strategies really focus on reducing climate pollution from new buildings, establishing baseline energy use in existing buildings, and then taking steps to work towards reducing pollution from those existing buildings over time. And the roadmap really establishes this not just as the ambition of Powerhead Colorado, but this has been a document that we've been working on for the past year with local staff across the region in a very collaborative manner. This is a document that identifies not how each individual jurisdiction is going to accomplish its climate goals, but how we are going to work together as a region to achieve consistency and collaborate together to problem solve along the way as we move forward. So this is the vision that we've identified within the roadmap. It's a region where our buildings are efficient, comfortable, affordable, resilient, and free of energy-related pollution. And we do think that this is accomplishable with all the, what's happening in the state ecosystem right now. We want to be able to power these buildings with clean electricity, and there's a lot of good work that's been happening across the state in transitioning our power sources. We want to make sure that our buildings are constructed with good insulation that prevent leaks and that are utilizing the right size equipment. We want to do this in a manner that helps us store, manage, and shift how we use energy and how we place demand on the grid with the goal of really encouraging the phasing out of fuel burning appliances in our region by 2050. So the roadmap identifies 3 key policy actions that we think jurisdictions should be taking, or we hope that they will take with us. The first is to address emissions and energy use in new buildings to advance further advanced building codes, updating the requirements for new construction, moving those buildings to be more efficient and transitioning them to utilizing electric equipment over time. The second strategy is really establishing building transparency policies for all of our existing buildings, not just the commercial buildings, but also our residential buildings, including single-family homes, to better understand how we're utilizing energy in our communities. And then building on that policy, really moving towards building improvement policies for both the residential and the commercial sector to encourage the transition, better performance of those buildings over time and encourage the transition of those buildings to electric equipment. So this is a visual that is in the roadmap describing kind of how we see the policy ladder and divided between sort of policies aimed at new construction and policies aimed at existing construction. On the new construction side, we see the baseline as really being what the state has already passed with the Model Low Energy and Carbon Code, which is the new state minimum. And then we will be working with our communities to identify stretch codes that communities can work towards over time that increase the electric preferred options within the code or move those communities towards fully electric codes. And then on the existing building side, really, again, starting with baseline transparency policies, which would be like benchmarking or home energy score policies, and then moving towards, over time, the adoption of building optimization policies, which better sort of tune up our buildings so that they're performing the way they should, to then building performance standard type policies, which improve either the energy use or reduce the greenhouse gas emissions from buildings over time. So then just to break it down a little bit further, particularly that right-hand side of how are we proposing to address emissions from our existing building stock, which as a reminder, in our climate, comprehensive climate action plan was identified as the #1 sector contributing to emissions in our region. We've really split our policy approach into 2 separate approaches for smaller scale residences and then larger scale commercial buildings. So in that baseline, these policies would really look like a home energy score or a home energy audit for residences, just to establish what is the equipment in these buildings, how are the buildings operating, and get a better feel for what opportunities there are to make improvements to those homes over time. And then a very similar type of policy that operates slightly differently for the larger commercial buildings, which would be a benchmarking type of program. And then as we move up that ladder for existing buildings, we're really looking towards encouraging our communities to work towards adopting either home upgrade policies that encourage buyers or sellers, potentially at the time of sale, to make equipment upgrades to their buildings. And then within the commercial space, both sort of retro commissioning or tune-up type policies, which basically do an audit of a building. They say, oh, you know, some of these systems are really old. We need to tune them up to make sure that they're performing appropriately to their best of their ability. And then towards the longer term BPS policies that would improve how those buildings utilize energy over time. So in the policy roadmap, you will also see that we have identified an ambitious, I think, but also reasonable policy development and adoption timeline. As a reminder, work to date, we've been working with communities across the region for about the last year now to both develop this policy and then start building out and come to consensus and agreement amongst our communities of what the details of each of those policies should look like. What buildings are captured, what would be the penalties, what would be the timelines for compliance. Those are all things we are currently developing with the community right now. We're hoping to bring that, we're working with New Buildings Institute, our research contractor, to model out the cost implications and emission savings that those policies we hope will lead to. And then we are also in the process of engaging not just with our communities or our jurisdictions, but with the communities in our jurisdictions and with industry that will be affected by these policies to begin soliciting their feedback on what the policy, details should be. But our goal really is to have our communities work towards adopting code and transparency policies in the next few years, and then move towards those building improvement policies starting maybe in the 2030 to 2035 timeline. And we know that implementation is really important. Policies are great, but really we need to make sure that people are able to comply with them. And so we want to be supporting our communities throughout this entire process to make sure that the implementation of these policies and adoption is phased in a manner that people can actually implement them in a successful manner. So I will pause there and see if there are any questions.
Thank you, Greg, very much. And Kim for being with us virtually. Questions or comments?
I have a question for you. The roadmap is really exciting. I think it's setting Colorado up for long-term success. My question is, New York and California have been in this space for over a decade, and so I'm curious to understand what lessons they have learned that we're incorporating into the policy roadmap and the work that you're doing so that we maybe evolve.
Great. I very much appreciate the question, which is what have we learned from other states and jurisdictions that are pursuing similar kind of policy pathways. And in particular, we've learned from their pitfalls and the challenges that they've encountered. So we are in communication with our peer jurisdictions across the region. We've had conversations with BayREN, which is a very similar type of organization that works on similar climate goals. We work with, we talk to NYSERDA and NEEP and the other sort of regional groups that are pursuing this work. I will say that the #1 thing, the reason why I mentioned the need for phased implementation and support in that process is that perhaps the biggest lesson learned is to try to avoid putting the cart before the horse, making sure that we have the program infrastructure and that our jurisdictions know what implementation needs in terms of staffing, in terms of advertising, engagement with the community to be able to successfully, help them actually comply with the policies as we roll them out. So we have, probably the biggest lesson we learned we've taken is to try to stage our approach to provide phased rollout of these policies. And then I think also to try to provide an on-ramp for all of our communities by creating, what I think are those baseline, focusing on those baseline benchmarking policies. You can't really fix what you don't know. And so those are really great policies for us to start identifying just how are we using energy in our region.
Dr. Davis.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I appreciate it. I appreciate all things that are going on with the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan, and I'm happy to announce that the City of Arvada just recently, we adopted our Climate Action Plan. Some of the questions that I have are from my community, from the older set, such as me, is some of the phasing. So we are encouraging the phase out of fuel burning, and in particular, it's appliances. I wanted to make sure I got that correct. So are we, for example, the neighborhood that I live in, it's all brick homes, mostly brick homes, with forced air, and we all have gas. So, and the average age of those folks who live in those homes are 70 to 80, if not 100. So just really thinking about being thoughtful as we make this as a visionary plan to look at the cross-section of the population of the homes in which these folks live in, I think is really super important. And then on the page with the policy ladder, I'm just wondering, I know that this has been asked from the Arvada Historical Society. Does some of this, these upgrades, will that apply to historic buildings? And the information I've received is some of those buildings were only heated by fireplaces. Very exciting. And then, and I'm sorry to ask all of these all together, but I'm sure you're, for the residential approach to the home energy score, I'm just wondering how this will affect rental homes that are owned by out-of-state persons or companies. But thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I will try to remember the three questions as I can. I believe the first question was with regards to older residents and their homes. And so with regards to that, what I would say first broadly with regards to all of your questions is these are the questions that we are currently grappling with in our policy frameworks. But they are questions that we are well aware of and we know that we need to address. I will say with regards to that first question, there's a reason why I think if you compare the residential strategy versus the commercial strategy, it's a much softer strategy. So the home energy score policy would functionally just require an energy audit of a house. And it raises awareness for future buyers. So at the point where it would most likely influence an upgrade would ideally be in our mind, at the point of sale of that home. So there would be no mandate for older residents to make upgrades to their homes. We know that there's lots of constraints on fixed incomes and whatnot. So the ideal sort of intervention point for making the upgrade would actually be at the time of sale. And it's a non-mandatory policy. There is evidence that it does lead to, increased awareness of energy use in a home does lead future homeowners to make upgrades to their homes, but they're hopefully better situated to do that with eyes wide open. Second question was
historic buildings.
Historic buildings will likely have a carve out within the BPS. We know that there's buildings that just will not comply with some of these policies. They're just so old, there's no pathway. So we are still navigating the parameters of what those carve-outs will look like, but there will be carve-outs for compliance, likely also for more financially constrained types of building owners, such as affordable housing owners and operators. We might have more staged approaches or longer timelines for compliance for them meeting targets. understanding that they have to navigate a much trickier financial stack situation.
That answered the last question.
Director Numela.
Thank you. I just had a follow-up question on the implementation side. So when it comes to businesses in, trying to report in on, because I saw something like ideally an annual report on their energy use. I mean, in my line of work, it's hard to even get them to do their business license. And so I am just kind of wondering if, and also because homeowners are not as savvy either all the time, are you planning to integrate in like Excel and United Power and maybe have them provide these energy scores?
Yeah, great question. I think we're still from an implementation standpoint, we have not fully ironed out all of the implementation details. We do, as a program, communicate with Excel and the other utilities on a regular basis from a program design and implementation standpoint. We want them to know what our policies are going to drive towards and make sure that they can help us in meeting their goals through their clean heat plan and clean energy plans, as well as to help our communities meet our goals. So, that said, I will say we know that compliance has been a challenge. I think it's one of the lessons we've learned from communities across the country is what kind of infrastructure do you need to stand up to make sure people know how to, create an account so that they can actually log in and send you their information to help them understand what the process is to call their utility and get their energy use so that they can report, right? Like there's a lot of hand-holding that needs to be done to just get people, work people into the compliance pathway. That's why, in particular, before we would add any building performance standards or your requirements, we just want to start with a few years of benchmarking in our communities, knowing that compliance rates in the first year aren't going to be great and working towards improving those compliance rates over time as we get to more building owners and residents.
Thank you, Greg. Any other questions or comments? Director Rath.
If I may, real quick. Thank you, Madam Chair, very much. Greg, thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to reemphasize, this is obviously not a regulatory document, right? It's a visioning document, probably compared to like a MetroVision type document, which has been worked upon in partnership with the Build Policy Collaborative, which is staff from your communities, and really appreciate the time and effort that they've spent on doing this as well. Also, maybe related to Director Numela's question, I think we're hypersensitive to cost of these, the phasing in of this stuff as well. And as Greg said, we're still working through the details of what that looks like, if there's opportunities for efficiency of process and all those types of things. So questions such as yours, I think, raises a lot of great questions, as well as Director Davis's too, is like stuff for us to consider as we move forward working with your communities. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, 14, sorry. Thank you. I can't see that.
Okay, can you hear me? Thank you. Super interesting. As a former real estate agent, I'm really aware of the point of sale being a great opportunity for making these types of upgrades. And I know this is a high-level visionary document, but are we engaging with the realtors around different types of programs and looking at like short-term green banking, so short-term loans could be actions, so that those upgrades could be made and then settled out at closing, and just different mechanisms that actually allow these things to happen without impacting the affordability or the financial constraints of the owners at the transaction. I think the realtors are great partners in programming these so that success is not just on the policy side, but providing those financial resources.
Thank you for the question. I would love to follow up with you later to brainstorm more, but we are currently in the process of our staged engagement with industry. We're planning it out right now for this fall. We're kind of waiting to figure out what the parameters of the policy were so that we could have a kind of 90% policy that we could share with industry so they could give us feedback. But that is the current, the plan is to engage with real estate agents and also the assessor community that would be going out and potentially doing the home energy audits. Our goal is to support the business ecosystem necessary for these policies to succeed. And so we are always interested in financing mechanisms that can help make sure that it's not an impediment to closing on a home, and then make sure that there's different mechanisms to distribute the contribution to any home upgrade between buyer and seller and things of that nature.
Thanks for the question. Are there any other questions or comments? May I have a motion to approve the Build Policy Collaborative Roadmap tonight? Director Bear.
Thank you. I move to approve the policy.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Raise your hands for nay. One. Nay on the phone? Okay, all right, we'll move forward. The action item has been approved, and we're going to move forward. So thank you very much, Greg and Kim, for tonight. We'll move on to one of our three informational briefings. The first one is our Regional Transportation District, RTD 2026 Annual Fast Tracks Report. This will be given by Cole Nieder, our Senior Manager, Planner, Transportation Planning and Operations.
Senior Manager, I will take that. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Cole Nieder. I'm DRCOG Senior Transit Planner. On your agenda this evening is RTD's annual Fast Tracks report, as required by Resolution Number 14, signed 2013. RTD will be providing an update on Fast Tracks status of their projects, on updated 5-year financial forecast, and joint service. I've got Keith Hall, an engineer at RTD, who's going to lead us through the presentation and answer any questions that you guys might have. Thank you.
We got a few of the letters right on the name. Most of them are wrong. Keith Hall, again, is who I am. Karen had asked me to step in, and apologies for the other misspelling. And I may need somebody to tell me how to work this. I may need somebody, yeah. Oh. I was pushing the arrows, but it didn't seem to do it. Oh, click. Just click on that. Okay, gotcha. All right. I'm an arrow kind of person. So this is a very brief presentation. We'll talk about the status of the Fast Tracks projects, updated financial forecast, and our 5-year financial forecast, as well as the joint service project. As most of you know, these are all the list of projects, but our last project to be completed was in September of 2020 with the in-line up to 124th Avenue. That is one of the incomplete projects. Northwest Rail, of course, is incomplete. I worked on more on that one. And then several light rail segments are also incomplete. This is the amount spent through 2025. This was our total project budget. What's not shown here is a revenue shortfall that we have experienced in the past with the global financial crisis in the mid-2007 to 2010 or so. I'm fuzzy on those dates anymore. And more recently, we've struggled with some of the financing to keep up with this. These are the 4 remaining rail line extensions that have not been completed. It's about 6 miles and 2 stations on the in-line. There's a 2-station segment on the southwest extension. The central corridor would extend that from 30th and Welton, or 30th and Downing to 38th and Blake to connect to commuter rail. And then, of course, the big project is the Northwest Rail that goes all the way to Longmont. Our current FISA balance, FISA is our Fast Track's internal savings account. Our current FISA balance is 185 million, almost 186. That is not enough money to take care of any one of the projects. So it's a significant shortfall. Moreover, that account is not expected to grow over the next 5 years, mainly because we're coming up on maintenance requirements for some of the original projects, and that's a fairly significant expense. Obviously, the board, RTD board, will have to make the decisions on any future projects, but some of our core focus right now is really on the maintenance of the existing system. The baseline plan for our forecast is based on our current budget, debt schedules, and system optimization models. We've done some work, and we're embarking on a new work with the comprehensive operations analysis to look at restructuring the bus service in the system. We have other initiatives underway, but our current update warns of a potential shortfall in the coming years, sales tax shortfall in the coming years. So we are trying really our best to manage the inflationary pressures relative to debt service for the existing rail system and an ever-increasing cost of service. As I mentioned, I did work on the Northwest Rail study that we completed in a couple of years ago, and that has morphed into the joint service proposal, which we explored with FRPR at that time of in the 2002 to 2004 timeframe, and that has morphed into the 3 daily round trips, which was part of the peak service study as well, between Fort Collins, an extended distance, and Denver Union stations. It serves 8 stations, including 6 of the fast track stations, which are Longmont, Boulder, Broomfield, Westminster, and of course, Denver Union Station. We are working toward an IGA, and we have authorized funding to support the design phase of that project into conceptual design with FRPR and the governor's office taking the lead on that project. So that could represent a milestone toward, taking fast tracks a bit further, and I'm hitting wrong every time. There we go. Thank you. Any questions?
Commissioner Stolzman.
Thank you so much. Ashley Stolzman, Boulder County. So I would just like to draw your attention to the blue table in the packet and encourage that when we're presenting this information to put everything in equal years, dollars. So we have an actual spend showing, but it's over 20 years of time. And so a project that was completed in 2010 is very different than a project that was completed in 2020 or 2022 or something that won't be completed until 2045. So I just think that when we present this information in a publicly available packet, it needs to have the actual, brought up to date dollars so that it's apples to apples. So just an encouragement. And then the second thing I would say about this is that we're calling this table Fast Track's program costs, but it's a mix of revenue sources. So it's not all Fast Track's tax funding. For example, in the Eagle project, there's a significant amount, over $1 billion of FTA New Start money. And several other lines, it's all Fast Tracks, and some of them it's private funding. So I think it's pretty misleading as a presentation of taxpayer funds to combine all those sources of revenue into one table in this way. And so I would just encourage, for the sake of transparency, splitting out the revenue sources differently so people can understand if you're in a district like mine where you've been paying in tax money over a period of time and you're not being served, you can understand where the money is going. And then when you get to take a route in another part of the district, you can appreciate what you're paying for. Thanks.
Dr. Hudson. Dr. Ward, sorry, Rachel.
Not a problem, Chair. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the presentation. I just have a couple quick questions about Northwest Rail. Surprisingly, as part of the Fast Tracks plan and documents you've been putting forth, not only to us, but also to the legislature and the governor's office, modeling about this 3 round trips a day, the service. Don't mention any further additions of service. Is RTD's assumption or understanding that completion of fast tracks means we're providing the peak level of service?
No. So what we worked with all of the stakeholders along the corridor when defining the 3 peak trips in the morning and 3 out, that was essentially to be the start of that service. And we would work with BNSF over time to make the necessary track upgrades to that service over time. It was really just to get that started.
Okay. I appreciate that. I think the concern when I read this document is that every other line that is listed as unfinished represents the full completion of that line, either the extension or, well, actually in this case it is the southwest line, the L line through downtown, and the N line extension up north. Only one that is not called out specifically for full completion is Northwest Rail. And so it concerns me that RTD is using Department passenger rail and joint service as a scape patch to not complete fast tracks as promised, as required by Senate Bill 25-161. Why is it that when you draft these reports, you are not including the full cost of completion like you are every other line?
Most of the other lines are actually quite simple to complete. One of the real challenges with the Northwest Rail is at the time we had the opportunity to purchase stuff right away, we did not. We did not have the resources to do so. It is now no longer available from BNSF to sell. And so anything we do would require a partnership with BNSF. They're protecting their asset. It's their asset. We don't have anywhere else to put the line other than in the BNSF corridor. And a lot of those costs of running a joint service are fairly difficult to get out of BNSF, in all honesty. You know, they're a private company. They're protecting their financial interests. So we don't always have the easy ability to, negotiate with them on what the real cost would be. And that particularly was complicated with the intercity rail project because they didn't know who they were dealing with. And so from our standpoint, it would be much, I think if we'd bought the property some time ago, we would know the cost. But now we're working with BNSF. We don't know the cost. We don't know. We have a good idea of what the cost would be for service, but for an all-day service, we actually have to widen out the corridor. We have to provide separate tracks. So the cost would be pretty considerable.
And I appreciate that. I really do. I just feel that it is misleading and inappropriate for you to at least not explain that in the document for the public to read. And I fully appreciate why this particular corridor is unique compared to the other RTD corridors. And so I would encourage you to provide further reports, not only to this body, but also to the governor's office and the legislature, and also for just the public to understand that you include something along the lines of RTD is still committed to the X number of trains a day as laid out in the 2004 plan approved on the April 2nd board meeting in 2004. And here are the reasons why we can't provide you a full cost estimate for roughly 50 trains a day because of X, Y, and Z. I think that would be much more transparent and appreciative by the community. Here's peak service.
A point taken. I'll take those comments back.
Thank you, Director Kondo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just trying to square up one thing here. I know that on page 7 of your slides, you're saying operational efficiencies and cuts required to manage a 3% annual inflation, but yet in your 5-year projection in the memo, just doing a 4-year CAGR here of your operating expenses from 2026 to 30, it shows about 11.4% over that time. So how do you explain 3% versus maybe 11 or 12% increase?
I'll go back and ask finance for that one. That's our finance department prepared that, and I wasn't part of the report preparation. So I'd have to ask for the details on what that actually means and how that was derived.
Just scratching my head here because, I mean, if you have low double digit rise in your operation expense, 3% is not even a far cry to try and anticipate how you're going to get ahead of that.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Cole, very much for the time. Okay, all right. Oh, okay. All right, we'll move on to a regional housing strategy update. And I think Reagan, Drew, and Senior Planner, Regional Planning and Development will lead the discussion.
Chair Whitlow, I was just going to share a brief introduction, if that's okay.
Sure, Sheila, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sheila Lynch, Director of Regional Planning and Development. We are thrilled to bring you yet another update on the regional housing strategy. As you know, we've been here, gosh, about every couple months, giving you updates as the plan is developing, the ideas that are emerging. And tonight, we hope to focus on kind of the implementation structures and how we see this plan moving forward once adopted. And so we're excited to bring those to you today. And I wanted to do an introduction because our project manager, Reagan Frew, this is our first board meeting. So please welcome Reagan, our project manager from DRCOG. And she is joined by Tyler Bump from Echo Northwest, who's been a great resource to us as we walk through this process. So thank you, Reagan and Tyler, and take it away.
Sheila, and good evening, everyone. We are glad to be here in front of you all this evening to project update on the development of a regional housing strategy. So we have a few things on our agenda this evening to cover with you all. First, we will give an overview of the strategy's draft structure. And then from there, we will share the regional structures related to collaboration as well as coordination mechanisms for mobilizing the strategy. I will then briefly cover the planned engagement for the final phase of the project and the upcoming project milestones after we answer any questions you all have for us. So the development of the strategy has taken a phased approach. It builds directly off the regional housing needs assessment, which establishes the scale and scope of the region's housing needs so that we can develop strategies that match the reality on the ground. Our first phase focused on building off this foundation. So during phase one, we conducted a review of the extensive housing work either completed or underway across the Denver region's local communities. Much of this research is captured in our document we call the environmental scan, which you'll see referenced on this slide here. We also conducted a regional context analysis, which specifically delved deeper into a couple of specific contexts within our region. This exercise included mapping key corridors, employment and activity centers, as well as the displacement risk analysis. From this foundation, we moved into phase two, which was really the bulk of the strategy's development. The first step was translating and drawing from all the insights we gathered throughout our engagement process thus far into goals and objectives. Also during this phase, we conducted some best practice research, which focused on identifying regional housing efforts in areas across the country with similar characteristics to the Denver region, who were also employing innovative solutions and transferable practices in the housing space. And then, of course, where we are today, phase three, sorry, a little ahead of myself there. Also in phase two, we rolled up all our foundational information, which included the needs assessment and everything we had learned in the process to date into draft components of the strategy. And phase three is where we are today, where we're putting all this information together. So refining those components, expanding on implementation and mobilization of the strategy, and ultimately working on the final regional strategy deliverable. With that, I will pass it over to Tyler Bump.
Morning, everyone. My name is Tyler Bump. I've been happy to help you all, stakeholders throughout the region and the DRCOG team on this work. The members of the board, thanks for having me tonight. I'm going to go through here our overview of the structure. As we go into this presentation, this is kind of a high-level greatest hits of where we are in our strategy right now and some of the big structural pieces, and as Sheila teed up, the mobilization components moving forward. Before I do that, one of the things that we have also been doing in addition to those phases of work is doing a lot of work with stakeholders. And one group specifically I want to mention is our stakeholder committee, or our steering committee, which includes Councilmember Kern, Commissioner Mollica, and Commissioner Levy as well. And so we've got a number of folks that are representing the DRCOG board as part of our steering committee, along with other folks in the region that are thought leaders on housing and practitioners as well. The air.
Yep.
Okay, so one of the things to start with is the value of regional housing strategy. And we've really been talking a lot with folks across the region around why should we be thinking regionally about housing? What's the value proposition to having a regional housing strategy? There are shared challenges across the region that no single community can solve alone. Part of the work that we did with the Regional Housing Needs Assessment is identify the need for 500,000 more homes needed by 2050. And that's a range of all incomes, a need for different housing types, diverse housing types throughout the region as well. Those barriers to meeting that need cross jurisdictional lines. And so thinking about a regional strategy and how we think cross jurisdictionally to solve those challenges is really the key focus of the strategy. The regional housing strategy strengthens local action, but it doesn't replace it. Local jurisdictions, local governments have really important local land use and investment authority, and that's preserved, and it's been a real big focus of us as part of this work to think about that. Our intent with the strategy is really to make the work that jurisdictions are doing at a local level and staff are doing easier and more efficient. It aligns resources and reduces duplications. It allows for communities to learn from each other and align investments in ways that have benefits, again, across jurisdictions, also within the jurisdictions where folks are working, and builds on existing momentum. It's scaling what already works, and I'll get into some of those examples that we learned from the environmental scan, and we want to scale those lessons learned that's working well across the region to other parts of the region. And it's moving partners from isolated efforts to collective impact. And then importantly, DRCOG offers foundational regional support as part of this. There's a lot of really great things that DRCOG as an organization does really well across the region. Convening, providing data and technical assistance, coordinating funding. DRCOG is not the owner of every solution. What we're thinking about is how do we leverage the expertise and the really good work that DRCOG does to help support the strategy. So this is an infographic of the components of the strategy. So we've got four main components: the vision, what is the strategy working towards, the goals and the pathways, which I'm going to focus on today in the presentation. The goals are what outcomes do we want to achieve, the pathways, what do we do to get there, and the implementation strategies are really how do we do it. The other thing that I'm going to cover in this presentation is what we're calling mobilization and governance a little bit later on in the presentation. So for that goals, the what outcomes do we want to achieve, we have 5 key goals, and these goals have been developed through a lot of stakeholder engagement and conversations with staff, local staff, housing practitioners, planners, housing authorities, developers, nonprofit affordable housing providers, a full range of folks throughout the region. These 5 goals are, we want to see an increased and diversified housing supply. We want preserved and stabilized affordable housing throughout the region. Strong and sustained regional coordination to advance housing and infrastructure goals. We want expanded and aligned funding capacity across jurisdictions. And we're thinking that housing should be reframed as a regional asset. How do we think about housing as a regional asset? A lot of the things that we've been hearing from stakeholders as part of this work is that housing is really critical as an asset to the region's economic competitiveness, housing related to economic development and economic competitiveness. That's one of the drivers of thinking about housing as a regional asset. So we also have 5 pathways. These are the initiatives that advance the goals. So these key 5 pathways that we're looking at is 1, make it easier and faster to build housing. 2, work as a region to fund housing. Within work as a region to fund housing, there's really 2 things that we're thinking about here. 1 is how do we use the funding that's available as efficiently as possible? And so a lot of the conversations that we've had with folks is that there's good funding, the state's providing funding, there's opportunities to leverage that funding in better ways to have more impact across the region. And then the second part of that is there's more funding needed to solve the challenge and meet the needs today. And so how do we think about additional funding longer term as well? Number three, leverage investments to achieve shared goals, and that's programmatic investments. That's also investments in the region's infrastructure that jurisdictions in the region have invested in the past time. Number four is partner to strengthen community stability and really thinking about preserving the opportunity for folks to be in their communities and what does that look like from an affordability standpoint and how do we operationalize that as part of the strategy. Number five is build regional support for housing. And we're hearing a lot about the need to have a consistent narrative and a communication strategy around housing and how do we build support for housing from having discussions at an individual level if there's an affordable housing project or a housing project that's coming into a community, helping folks like you at the elected official level understand the housing implications that's happening in your communities and how does that relate to this regional challenge. Really thinking about this communication element. Now, from ideas to action, we're going to present a few concepts that we have here around what we're calling mobilization and governance, but really that's how do we move some of these goals and pathways and strategies forward. We're thinking about this sort of regional structure and coordination mechanisms. The one thing that I want to highlight is this regional partnership. And a lot of the best practices work that we had evaluated of other regions that have been successful and a lot of the things that we've observed as a team over time, it's really important to have a committee that is looking at the regional housing strategy and monitoring it long term. And so we have a recommendation from this governance standpoint to create a regional housing advisory committee, DRCOG, to be that group that does that ongoing monitoring and tracking and creates that momentum or continues that momentum forward throughout the region. There's another part here that we're calling Regional Housing Ideas Exchange, and we'll get into these in a little bit more detail later, but this is really staff level, sort of practitioner level engagement. On a quarterly basis, probably something like that, staff across the region getting together, having conversations about what's working, what's not working, how do we continue to collaborate across the region better together. And then this other piece, which is really, really important, is this concept of sub-regional collaboratives. And again, I'll get into that in a little bit, but sub-regional collaboratives is a way to coordinate across jurisdictional boundaries in ways that are happening today. There's unique sub-regional collaboratives that have been happening across the Denver region. Boulder County's been doing it for a while. Jefferson County does some work. Douglas County does a good job with jurisdictions. Gilpin County has been exploring opportunities to work with other jurisdictions across boundaries. And so we want to support that as a unique way to think about implementation and scale it to other parts of the region as well, because it is an interesting way, again, to work across jurisdictions. So on the Regional Housing Advisory Committee, first I'll go through the purpose and the role. The purpose of this committee is really about guiding the regional housing strategy, serves as the central coordination body for the strategy and the implementation of the strategy. It's a way to convene regional partners, as I mentioned earlier, monitoring progress and advising implementation actions across the region. And when we think about the role and the folks that would be involved in this, it's really about content and thought leadership, not necessarily about representation across the region, but it is about who has the knowledge to help inform and help implement the strategy. So it really is about an implementation body and implementation advisory committee. We have had some conversations with folks around potential membership and what that could look like. Local government staff, housing authorities, DRCOG staff, reps from the DRCOG board, elected officials from across the region, representatives from state agencies, private sector partners, philanthropic partners, and CBOs and service providers. As part of our work, both the steering committee and we had a large advisory group that's helping advise it, a lot of people really want to stay engaged and are really committed to this long term. And so we're reflecting that in this housing advisory committee, that people want to continue to see it stay engaged. They want to see the implementation of the strategy. They want that continuity across the region moving forward. And then one note on the Regional Housing Strategy Idea Exchange. Again, it provides an ongoing staff level coordination forum to support implementation. It focuses a little bit more in the details on technical assistance and peer learning and operational coordination across jurisdictions and partners, helps align day-to-day housing, infrastructure, funding, and planning work across the region, identifies common barriers, implementation barriers, and resource gaps, supports information sharing and collective learning, and it complements the advisory committee by focusing on implementation and technical coordination rather than the broader regional strategy and guidance. So this is kind of a more detailed in the day-to-day weeds of implementation across the region to help support that bigger guidance on the regional strategy. The structure of this, convened and facilitated by DRCOG, again, probably on a quarterly basis with ad hoc working sessions as needed. There might be specific topics. One of those topics I could see looking back into the past is Prop 123. When that funding was available, there were a lot of jurisdictions that were sort of staff that were working together to see who was doing what and how they were talking about it and what jurisdictions were advancing their commitment to Prop 123 outcomes. Flexible participation based on implementation topics. It may include more focused technical working groups around specific issues, and it's designed to support ongoing coordination at the staff level across local governments and implementation partners throughout the region. And then the sub-regional collaborative coordination mechanism. The purpose and the role here is groups of jurisdictions and partners working together at a sub-regional scale. And these sub-regional collaboratives are really interesting because the housing markets are regional, right? People, households across the Denver region make a decision based on what they can afford, where their job is, the transportation networks, the infrastructure, the quality of life, all of those things that people have the sort of think about and make decisions on. A lot of times you've got groups of cities that are part of these kind of submarkets that can work together that aren't a county. They might cross county jurisdictions. So it's a way to be flexible and scale to have the most impact at the sub-regional level. It allows coordination of resources across boundaries, coordinating project delivery, implement strategies, again, at a more granular level when regional alignment alone is insufficient. What works in parts of Gilpin County, what parts of Douglas County specifically. For membership, it can and will take many different forms. They can be coalitions of counties and cities within a county, groups of cities across county boundaries that work together, or even cross-county collaboratives. Sub-regional collaboratives define geography and who is at the table to coordinate those issues. And it's really focused on scaling effective existing sub-regional models for broader regional impact. And again, it allows flexibility where coordination can be the most impactful. The other thing on these sub-regional collaboratives, in our best practices work, we had a lot of conversations with jurisdictions and other folks, and this is one of the things that came up that's working really, really well to implement regional housing strategies is this sub-regional approach to thinking about that. Questions, we do have a couple examples from our best practices research as well.
Tyler?
We'll go in.
Hey, questions or comments? Director Mulvey.
Hi, yes, I come from Douglas County, so my question has to do with the sub-regionals. At first, I want to thank you for considering the sub-regional collaboratives because that's how Douglas County functions with its housing needs in particular, and it's very successful. My first question is, do you envision the sub-regional representation at the Ideas Exchange?
Could be.
And my second question is, how much consultation was there so far at the sub-region with the sub-regionals that exist already in developing the mechanism?
Great question. Maria from Douglas County Housing Partners has been a good thought partner as part of this work. We've had conversations with the housing authorities across the region as well, and also the other sort of county collaboratives that include housing authorities but are kind of doing their own thing as well. This is really about scaling the good work that's happening at the local level, again, for regional impact and support.
Foster, then.
Mike Foster from Superior. I attended the Colorado Municipal League conference a couple weeks ago, and there were a couple of presentations on housing and missing middle housing specifically. I'm curious how you envision making it easier and faster to build housing while adding in sub-regional committees that, from a developer standpoint, would add a layer of bureaucracy to getting housing. And my question is there a piece that's going to be working to work on state legislation to make it easier to build some of that missing middle housing like condos? I know developers are really concerned about construction defect lawsuits and insurance. So how is all of that fit into this?
That's a great question. So that is a topic that has come up from some jurisdictions and some partners across the region as something that they want to have more information on. And the regional structure, including the sub-regional collaboratives, is a way for DRCOG to provide technical assistance on topics just like that. And so similar ways that DRCOG provides technical assistance through the Livable Centers program now, I can see a future in which DRCOG, through implementation of the regional housing strategy, provides technical assistance on topics like middle housing, support that. And the other thing that I might note to your other question is that the intent for the collaboratives is not to be a regulatory body. It's not intended to be like administrative or development review focused. It really is about collaboration. It's around efficiency of resources. It's really about removing barriers and making it easier to.
My next question is, some communities have affordable housing targets with new developments, and excuse me, accessing funding can be very, very difficult. In Superior, we just approved our first affordable senior housing project. It's taken 6 years to pull all the financing together, and the cost to build that 6 years ago was a fraction of what it is today. So how do we, through this strategy, create more real-time financing strategies to help those communities that have affordable housing targets to be able to access that funding more readily or more quickly?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've talked a lot about that in our steering committee work and with stakeholders. And one of the things that we have heard is that there's an opportunity for, in these sub-regional collaboratives specifically, for jurisdictions to work together and support each other. So there may be an opportunity for a project in Superior. There may be an opportunity for other jurisdictions, Boulder County or in other counties around Superior, that might want to support that. And having even that cross-jurisdictional, sub-regional support also could potentially create more competitive applications for funding. So I do think having that coordination can support longer-term funding opportunities that are a little bit easier to move. But we do hear about the funding barriers. One of the things that the sub-regional collaboratives has been really helpful for in other regions help support collaboration a little bit more around those priority projects. And so if through a sub-regional collaborative process, if that's a priority for Superior and it's a priority for a sub-regional collaborative, those jurisdictions are working together to make that happen collaboratively.
Dr. Normel.
So just a couple of comments. One, for the sub-regional collaboratives, I know you talked a lot about having flexibility, but what I have noticed in the execution of them is that they're a little bit, they could use some structure and some consistency, because in some ways there's a lack of a base for just simple governance, leadership, and if DRCOG or, however we're setting this up, it would be really lovely to say, okay, if it's a group of cities, this is what it's going to look like. And honestly, when I think about communities on the East Coast that have been doing this for a lot longer, they have a very defined structure for, the regional and sub-regional groups and a defined set of actions that they can take. And in some ways, that could be more effective than leaving so much flexibility that there's not clarity over, and maybe even equity between certain subregions. So that's one point.
That's a good point. And a lot of the conversations we've had with DRCOG and their role is around that sort of convening capacity building support on implementation. And that is the way that other regions have supported sub-regional collaboratives is those foundational things to help structure. How do you get it moving? How do you make sure that it's effective longer term? Provide those sort of capacity building, convening, and technical assistance, ongoing support too. It does require that regional support, and that's why we're thinking we've got the regional housing strategy with this regional support level that's helping to implement through these sub-regional cooperatives.
It would be helpful, to be honest, for a city that has 2 counties. And we also, not only do we work with the housing authorities of those counties, but we also do public-private partnerships with nonprofits. And so for us, it's kind of hard to imagine what type of sub-regional collaborative we'd be able to tap into. I don't know, for that, I don't know if there's so much flexibility even in the structure too, you know, because you had it all listed on there. And I was thinking, which horse do we pick?
I do think that there is a lot of value in the flexibility, both from knowing that there's different priorities across different subregions, and I think that's a good thing, right? And so you've got some regions that might prioritize certain activities and certain outcomes over others because they're unique to those subregions, those communities in that that warrants that kind of focus. It does get more challenging when you're counties and multiple. One of the best practices that we looked at is a region, ARCH in King County. And there is one of the jurisdictions that I've worked with, Auburn, Washington, that is between Pierce County, King County, but they also created their own work with the South King County Homelessness Partnership to do work that's sort of cross-county. So there are ways in which jurisdictions that are split county have found it effective, but it does require some those jurisdictions that have those unique challenges, unique solutions through the sub-regional work.
Thank you. One last, I guess, request would be, because we have some of our own units that we should be tracking but aren't, it would be helpful to have more assistance in, you know, the public realm for helping us track our units. Because obviously the housing authorities can do that themselves, but as we are required now to have our housing action plans and to know what's happening with all of the affordable housing, there's just not a huge infrastructure and a lot of organizations that are available for us to tap into. So that would be, I mean, geez, if DRCOG had, oh yeah, by the way, we do this, and we could pay you a certain amount each year, that would be great.
Yeah, that's one of, with regional governments that have a regional housing strategy and focus on implementation, that is one of the things on the data providing and technical analysis side that governments can provide. DRCOG has a very, very talented data analytics team. Worked with a lot of regional governments, and DRCOG and so there are opportunities to provide that data. The other thing with the sub-regional collaboratives that might be interesting for folks here is some of the smaller jurisdictions that I've worked with specifically really get a lot of value out of these sub-regional collaboratives because a lot of them share staff. So you might have smaller jurisdictions where you don't have the resources to have a program manager. And a lot of these sub-regional collaboratives are a way for jurisdictions to pool those resources and provide those services that they otherwise wouldn't be able to provide because of the size of their jurisdiction. There's ways to even make some of that sort of tracking kind of program manager type work happen at a sub-regional level too through collaboratives. Some of the smaller jurisdictions I've worked with have found that very helpful.
Director X.
Thank you, Madam Chair, very much. I just want to follow up on Director Nermella's comment. Listen, we're very interested in activating this plan, and the conversations such as you're having, whatever DRCOG's appropriate role might be. I mean, you all will dictate that. We're certainly open to whatever we have to do in order to make you all successful in this space. So we'll talk about that more. The sub-regional concept that you talked about, you know, having a more formalized structure or whatever. You know, we have experience with that, of course, on the transportation side. We've established sub-regional forums, and each forum has a specific set of bylaws. Now, they're not all alike, right? But we've established, you know, some structure in there. And then, you know, the subregions have played on the edges, right, to kind of massage it to be their own. I would suggest we would offer something up like that again.
Commissioner Lloyd.
Is this on? Thank you. Rebecca Lloyd, Clear Creek County. We have a fairly new regional housing authority, and I'm looking at your Regional Housing Authority Advisory Committee and your potential membership. Want people calling you saying, yes, we're interested, or how is that going to come about?
That's a great question. I think could answer that question. We are a month out from having the strategy published and done, and I think the goal is to hit the ground running and start implementing this thing right away. But Sheila, do you want to talk about that?
Can you hear me okay? There we go. One of the things that we've done with other projects is we have brought a proposal before the board about how we would structure a group like this. We've heard from a lot of stakeholders. We want to make the size nimble enough so that scheduling is easy and all those other things, those logistics. And we heard that we should take some time to understand perspectives needed on that group and then take the step of, okay, who's out there that could bring those perspectives to that group? So we plan on bringing a plan after we get this plan adopted. We'll bring a plan to all of you about how we'd form that committee. And at that time, we'd love to hear ideas.
I may just add on to that. Listen, we're aware there's a lot of groups in this space right now, right? And we want to make sure we're not being duplicative of the work that's being done out there. So we've had conversations like the consortium that's out there that's being led by DOLA as well as some philanthropic groups. You know, we know they're out there. We're not sure what the future of that group is going to be. So we're in conversations and they're aware of the concepts that we're talking about with regards to this advisory committee or whatever we're calling it. And they see it as probably a good fit for the region moving forward. So just know that, you know, we're conscious of everything that's going on. It's just, there's just so much in this space right now. We're trying to just, you know, knit it all together and, you know, make it simpler for a lot of people. So just stay tuned on it.
Other questions or comments? All right, Reagan. Tyler, thank you very much.
Reagan's got one slide on next steps I think she wants to cover real quick. But thank you.
As Reagan's coming up, can I just mention one thing, Madam Chair, on this thing? Because Mayor Sweetland came in a little late tonight, and the reason she came in late was that she was at a ribbon cutting on an affordable housing conversion of a commercial building to residential units. The actual project is in the city county of Denver, and City of Centennial is giving some of their private equity bonds to the project because obviously it will help and support Centennial residents. I don't know, Mayor Sweetland, if you want to say anything more on that, but I just thought that was, you know, it was very apropos that we're talking about this tonight, and I thought it was a cool project.
Well, and it's funny because everything that you mentioned about partnership and collaboration, so while this building is not located in Centennial, it is on the cusp of Centennial. Inglewood also gave some private activity bonds for this project. It's the old Invesco field, or Invesco, not Invesco field, Invesco building, office building. It has 3 and 4 bedroom units, which is a huge need in our community. And so while people may not live in Centennial, a lot of them are going to work in Centennial. We had the Littleton Public Schools superintendent go out. They saw that as a way to bring in those first year teachers, gave them a really heads up to say, we can get you really nice housing. Shea Homes developed it on time, under budget. So this is the first commercial conversion that we're aware of in Denver, but I think just in the metro area. And they did not miss out on any of the features. Beautiful, beautiful mountain views. You can see the $3 million houses, or you can have affordable housing with beautiful mountain views. So it's a really great project. Invesco left a lot of their fitness equipment, so now they have a gym in there. They have a dog washing station because they had outdoor living area. They have a park area for kids, and because it's a commercial building, they had a lot of parking, and so they can use that parking for the residents as well as has a new parking lot that they can then go ahead and another building on. So we're really excited. I'm sure Inglewood is as well, to be a part of this. And we all know that the more units that we all have within, you know, the community, the better off the entire community, whether it's in Centennial, Denver, Inglewood, we're all working together. So it was really an exciting event. So I'm sorry that I was late, but I didn't want to miss it.
Just a quick look ahead for what's left for finalizing the regional housing strategy. So we have an in-person partner workshop scheduled for our member government staff on Monday, July 27th. Not only will we be sharing the implementation strategies and then the next step for the strategy during that workshop, we'll also use that time for folks to share the work they're doing locally on their housing action plans and explore ways that DRCOG's work can support collaboration and action across the region to meet communities. And then next month, we hope to have a full draft of we plan to have a full draft of the strategy out to member governments for their review. And then we'll also be back in front of the board in September for adoption of the strategy. And then just this late summer, early fall, DRCOG is launching 2 important efforts. The first is an update to our regional plan Metro Vision to incorporate some of those statutorily required strategic growth and water supply elements. And then the second is a technical assistance program for local governments as they develop housing action plans. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Reagan. All right.
Madam Chair, I also want to mention one other initiative we have. We're beginning to plan for. We're working in partnership with Metro Mayor's Caucus, Heidi Williams, to do a housing series over the next year. We're expecting the first one to be kind of late September, early October timeframe. And it's geared towards elected officials within our region, senior staff. So stay tuned on that. Just wanted to give you a heads up that it's coming, and you're all invited. Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to community-based transportation planning update by Brittany Compton and Lauren Kyrgyz, who are planners for transportation planning and operations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's good to see some familiar faces. I know I was at the Peer Exchange in Seattle, and so there are a couple of you that were also there. It's good to see you here. My name is Brittany Compton. I'm a multimodal planner here at DRCOG in TPO, and so I'm specifically in the sub-area and corridor planning department here at DRCOG. So we work on some of the longer corridor planning for safety, and then I'll be talking today a little bit more about our community-based transportation planning set-aside program. So this program is a newer set-aside at DRCOG. So we completed 2 pilot programs, and then this is our first full round of programs with the goal of making sure that we improve mobility options for historically disadvantaged or marginalized communities in the DRCOG region. So these are projects where community engagement is extremely important and very emphasized and much more in depth than perhaps some of our other projects. It's more implementation oriented, and these are projects that are nominated by local jurisdictions or entities like maybe CDOT or other organizations. So our pot of funding from the TIP for 2024 to 2027 has been $2.4 million. Like I mentioned before, we have local nominating agencies that have brought these projects to our attention. And so the nice thing about these projects is we take on the procurement, the funding, and project management of a consultant and reporting to CDOT with these projects. So these are really great projects for jurisdictions that may be lacking staff time or funding capacity to complete certain things. So we've had a lot of jurisdictions that have some pretty important projects that have been left on the back burner just because of staff capacity or funding that we've been able to help with. The first of those projects was in Federal Heights along the 92nd Avenue corridor. And this is a short 1 or 2 mile section of 92nd Avenue between Federal Boulevard and Pecos Street, which is on the DRCOG high injury network. There was a pedestrian fatality
excuse me, shortly before this study kicked off. And so there was a huge issue of focus on urgent safety issues. So the community really wanted to address safety and speeding concerns in that area. So as the plan concluded, we have some short-term improvements and long-term improvements that have come out of this. The short-term improvements include a couple quick build or things that are maybe a little easier for the local jurisdiction to implement, such as paint and post chicanes and medians and rectangular rapid flashing beacon enhanced crossings. And then we have some longer-term improvements like raised median islands to reduce speeds for vehicles, 2 roundabouts, a shared use path, and 2 pedestrian hybrid beacons. One of the other projects that we have is really 2 projects combined in one. It's the 303 Artway and the Montbello Loop implementation plan. So these were two plans that had actually been started locally by the communities, and I think there had been planning locally for around 10 years already. And what ended up happening is there was a gap between what they wanted to happen in the design guidelines for Dottie, and so we needed to try to merge those two to make it implementable. So these were both kind of neighborhood like walkways or ways to kind of travel that would also have like placemaking elements in them. The 303 Artway will be over in Montbello and in Northeast Park Hill, and then the Montbello Loop in Montbello. So we did partner with a local nonprofit that had been partnering with these communities called Radian, and then also the Montbello Organizing Committee. And then, of course, Dottie and Trust for Public Land was who had helped nominate the project. So for this project, we did have short, medium, and long-term steps that we're planning to put into place or hoping that the local jurisdictions can fund for these projects. We have planning level cost estimates at certain cross sections that were identified as maybe a little bit more difficult or longer to implement. And then we were working to align the recommendations with Denver's design guidelines, programs, and projects. The next project is the Brighton Core City Circulation Program, which was brought to us by the City of Brighton. We studied Bridge Street over on the west side from South Platte River to 22nd Avenue. So this was a pretty long area, another one of the streets that's on DRCOG's high injury network. One interesting thing to note is that there was street widening just west of the study area. So a little bit of conflicting changes with the street, but this part of the street also is part of the historic downtown. So there was more of a need to change, the safety since it's more of a walkable area. So we did have quite a few recommendations. This was one of our multimodal projects, so looking at changes for safety for all modes of travel. We were recommending adding medians or landscaping, adding some striping and updating the roundabouts at US 85. So we talked to CDOT, since they own the roundabouts there, about some changes that could be made for safety, since there are quite a few crashes within the roundabouts. And then looking at signal updates and improved pedestrian crossings at several locations. One exciting thing that's really great about this is that Brighton was actually able to put some of the recommendations in their transportation preservation and improvement project starting next year. So we're looking forward to seeing some of those shorter term improvements on the ground. The last study I'll review is the Pecos Corridor Study. This was nominated by Adams County, and so we worked with them on a section of Pecos Street south at 62nd Parkway up north to 84th Avenue, and this is technically an unincorporated Adams County. And this was another one of the studies where we're focusing on multimodal transportation and safety as part of DRCOG's high injury network. And so as a result of this study, we were able to create a community-informed vision and implementation plan. So there are some shorter and medium-term goals, but there's also some recommendations for quite a bit of an overhaul of this section of Pecos. So this included, recommendations like corridor identity with art and patios and landscaping. Our consultant came up with a pretty cool idea, I thought, to have food trucks at one of the larger parking lots to kind of create a little bit more of a destination feel for Pecos Street in this area. We're also recommending improvements for pedestrians with wider sidewalks and raised driveway crossings, since there are quite a few businesses along this area. And then a couple of points that we saw as popular mid-block crossings to more formally kind of adopt those as crossings. In some areas where it makes sense, we're recommending build raised and protected bikeways. So east-west connections, we have like the Clear Creek Trail, but north-south is a little more difficult along that area. And one of the more major corridor-wide improvements that we're recommending is raised medians and managed driveway access to reduce speeds and help reduce conflicts. And then, of course, bus stop consolidation and enhancement is on the list, but RTD is also working on that. They had, as you probably all know, recently completed a study talking more about, several of the stops and improvements that could be made to those stops. So throughout these last couple of years, I think our program officially began in 2024. We've noticed interest that we've garnered with neighboring jurisdictions. So, for example, like the Pecos Corridor Study, we were able to partner with Federal Heights at one of the intersections where it, kind of starts going into Federal Heights, and work together to come up with recommendations for that specific intersection. We found a lot of really great local community-based organizations to work with, and we found them to be really instrumental in reaching the communities that they know well, and a couple instances where we've been able to find, some potential funding to recommend that the local jurisdictions pursue to move the study forward. A couple challenges were just maintaining buy-in from nonprofit sponsored projects. So a lot of times those are organizations that are less familiar with planning and a little more with the work that they do as nonprofits. So we've learned a lot of how to kind of bring them into the planning process and teach them about a little bit more about what that looks like. We've had several studies where it's been difficult to find groups that are formally organized or community-based organizations that we can lean on to tap into the communities. So some of them we have not been able to find those community-based organizations. And we continue to work on managing community expectations with long-term plans, which can be quite difficult. Knowing when, something will be implemented can be a difficult question to answer, and just trying to manage those expectations. So just to wrap up, I did want to mention that we have one other study that we completed after this presentation was finalized in Commerce City for a microtransit study. We did apply for RTD partnership funding, and so we're waiting to hear back soon, hopefully, about, results if that is able to be funded. And now we're working on scoping of projects, or in the process of interviewing for consultants for 3 more projects. One is the Sherrillwood Transportation Vision. Sherrillwood is a neighborhood that's adjacent to the Pecos corridor, so we're going to be able to lead on a lot of the recommendations from Pecos on this project. Adams County has brought this project to our attention related to safety and speeding and things within the neighborhood that we're going to study. And North Glen, we're funding a first and last mile plan for the light rail station there that, classic first and last mile problems with connections to the city. And then the last study is a 6th Avenue and Harlan Street community crossing study. So City of Lakewood is wanting to study some sort of underpass or overpass to connect like North and South Lakewood over or under 6th Avenue. So I'm looking forward to that. Our next call for projects will be this fall. So I would encourage any local jurisdictions to submit projects. We really try to take a lot of the administrative burden off of the jurisdictions to help them move forward important projects like these. So we have like a shorter letter of interest form, and we may, follow up with questions, but there isn't like a long interview process or anything. Studies are usually about a year to a year and a half, depending on the project need and what the jurisdiction is looking for. And then the goal is to be able to hand off that plan to the jurisdiction to pursue it further. So hoping that we hear from more jurisdictions and maybe some of our newer counties with projects. So thank you.
Questions or comments for Brittany?
Yes, thank you. Appreciate this presentation. I work at a nonprofit in my day job, and we partnered with DOTI, so Denver's transportation folks, around a community-based program in the Globeville neighborhood. So not only the sort of things that you're highlighting here, but what my experience was is I work in a youth development agency, and it really gave them a way to sort of activate in their community. So I love this model. I look forward to seeing more opportunities of this. I found this to be really well received in our neighborhood and a great opportunity for young people who are often not included in these conversations to get really activated in it and sort of take a lead in directing this and getting more people involved. So thank you.
Dr. Barr and then Director Kondo.
Thanks for the presentation. I love this too. I was just curious about funding strategies. Does it come with either recommendations? You mentioned applying for a partnership grant from Commerce City microtransit. So does the plan also include some sort of here's some next steps for you to try this off the ground?
Yeah, most of the plans, or I would say all of them at this point, have included next steps. And with our consultant and DRCOG have been able to help, set up the slides and information, and I'll continue to support, if we get the funding for microtransit, to make sure things are up to date on our website for that study. And so we do have kind of a list that we've been pulling together over the last year or so to have kind of like the common forms of ways to implement projects. But yeah, the goal is to move these towards implementation as much as possible.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to share an anecdote. I first we all saw this on the RTC committee last week, and I thought what was really touching and a warm and fuzzy feeling being part of that RTC committee was that one of the CBO members from the Montbello area, she was so tickled pink that we looked at this and came up with recommendations. And literally, I think she said, and correct me if I'm exaggerating, they had been working on this for 10 years. And so finally coming to DRCOG, RTC, and having us hear to their needs was just really, for me, it warmed the cockles of my heart. And I see Eric Conklin nodding his head. He was there. For me, I think it's really important that I never participated in the RTC committee before. Now that I did, and how I saw this and how CBOs are part of this ecosystem, I think it's so very important. So I would encourage you all to participate in a subcommittee if all possible. It really was, for me, an eye-opener.
Any questions or comments? All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Brittany. Thank you very much. All right, there are 3 informational items, so take that at your leisure. At home. Next are committee reports. The chair requests these reports to be brief, reflect decisions made, and information germane to the business of DRCOG. With Chair Bear. I can't get over that. I love to say it.
I am currently looking for a committee to chair.
There you go.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Stack.
So yes, STAC, actually our July meeting was canceled, but we did have a June meeting, and our June DRCOG meeting was canceled. So I will tell you about the June meeting. At STAC, it was recommended that the Transportation Commission adoption of the 2027 to 2030 statewide HIP program, or STIP. We heard a spotlight presentation from CDOT Region 3, received an update on the status of the MMOF funding, which is paused but not canceled. Received the final results from the statewide travel survey and heard about CDOT's Transportation Asset Management Program.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to Metro Mayor's Caucus by Director Conklin.
Good evening. Our most recent Metro Mayor's full caucus meeting was June 3rd. The focus was transportation, and we had a presentation from Front Range Passenger Rail, South Pace. We also had the RTD chair with us, and then to me the most impactful is we had Marissa Harmon and Seth Hoffman from Lone Tree talk about the Link on Demand program. That was just absolutely amazing hearing about that. So first mile, last mile on that program. Also a legislative recap now that we were safely out of the legislative session. Coming up, our Public Safety Task Force is having our first meeting later this month, and the next full caucus meeting is Wednesday, August 5th. That's my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Metro Areas County Commissioners, Executive Director Rex, next.
Thank you, Madam Chair, very much. Our last meeting was on June 12th, and the program was mostly Mayor Mike Johnston, City County of Denver was there to talk about reduction in the unhoused population in the latest report. Great conversation. He's obviously very attuned to this conversation, so that was wonderful. There was a good dialogue amongst the county commissioners about the topic, and will continue into the future, of course. Also had a presentation primarily by Adams County related to food resiliency and the work that they're doing in the county. We're expecting to get other reports from other counties here in the future. So just metro area county commissioners that are in the room, just so you know, with regards to upcoming guests, we've reached out to both gubernatorial candidates with the hope of just having an informal chat with them. At 2 different times. I don't think they'll be there together. As well as we've reached out to the governor's office as well, kind of get a, debrief on everything that Governor Polis has been involved in over the last 8 years. So we'll get information out to you soon.
Report from Advisory Committee of Aging, Jayla Sanchez-Warren.
Hello, good evening. The Advisory Committee on Aging was briefed about the Area Plan on Aging. Every 4 years, every area agency on aging in Colorado has to do an Area Plan on Aging. It's a federal regulation. It's prescriptive, developed by the federal government and the state government. It helps guide how we prioritize our services, programs, and resources, which are very limited these days, over the next 4 years. A big part of that process is we do key informant sessions and community conversations with older adults. And we're holding at least one in each county of each of those, so a key informant as well as a community conversation. My first one is tomorrow in Idaho Springs. So I'm excited about that. Going to project support to talk with the older adults. This process also includes a survey from individuals who are older adults as well as professionals. This planning process, the Advisory Committee on Aging was our first key informant session. So we always do the advisory, we always survey the advisory committee and talk with them first. They answered all of our questions. We got information and they helped us refine our tool a little bit. And so that was very valuable information for us. Tomorrow at 11, so right around the meal site time, going to be talking with older adults about how things are going in Idaho Springs and Clear Creek County. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we'll have a report from our Regional Air Quality Council by Director Kern.
Thank you. So it was a really interesting meeting. It is, some of the notes and the actual recording are posted online from the meeting. I really recommend it. There was a special presentation that was given by two different scientists. They put together a study from 2020 to 2024, so a 5-year period, looking at the health and financial or economic impacts of ozone, and specifically ozone levels greater than 65 parts per billion. So the EPA standard that we try to meet in the non-attainment area is 70 parts per billion, and so they were looking at the 65. The profound numbers that we're talking about, if we could attain that within just the non-attainment region, just essentially our DRCOG region a little farther north, there would be savings to the health impacts on people somewhere between $200 million to $1 billion a year. Those are just health costs. Those don't consider days people aren't working, they have to take off because their child has asthma that's been induced by ozone, high ozone levels. And this was actually considering removing wildfire contaminants and particulates. So those particulates weren't even part of the survey. So if you can imagine what it was like over the 4th of July couple of weeks, with the wildfire smoke, people who don't even have asthma couldn't breathe, right? Burning eyes, miserable. So this study was so informative, and it's fascinating given our conversation tonight on trying to reduce the emissions coming from buildings, given that that is 50% of the cause. Because the next piece of information that was fascinating and presented to the RAC was that the background ozone levels, things that we cannot change, we don't have anything to do with the way that the air circulates, the way that we will persistently have some levels of like smog and things that hug us because of the mountains. What we can affect, even by doing some of the really intense projects that are like on the horizon, and this would include some of the DRCOG projects around housing and greenhouse gas emissions, it's still predicted that over half of the areas that get assessed within our region will not be able to reach 70 parts per billion. They will still be so high. So if you can imagine the number of sick children, at-risk seniors whose lives are actually in jeopardy by this, it is an amazing responsibility that everyone in this room bears. And so I highly recommend you guys go out if you have, an hour and just take a look at the information and take it back to your councils so that we can work together to keep everyone safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Report now from E470 Authority, Director Mulkey.
Hi, E470 was primarily occupied with some operational things. First, there was some IGA approvals with each town, and then some IGA approvals for some of the interchange work. And then Sable Interchange is going to open soon. There'll be a grand opening on July 27th. Hopefully our local mayors and representatives will be able to attend that. And then lastly, there was some discussion about the bond refunding and the conservative management of that and paying it off. It's all looking very good. There was an upgrade in the rating, the financial rating with one of the services.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to CDOT. Darius Bacchus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A lot of our rural regions have been dealing with helping with the response to the wildfires, including our folks down in the southeast portion of the county with the Aspen Acres fire, helping with evacuating some of the communities down there. So there'll be some of the, frankly, heroic efforts will be recognized at the Transportation Commission meeting, tomorrow. Moving on to some of the other updates. There is going to be an event around Floyd Hill, a Floyd Hill Dash event on July 19th. Wanted to mention that. So if you're interested, happy to give more information around that. Since the last time we met, Transportation Commission did approve the 10-year plan. So my colleagues in Regions 1 and 4 are going to be working on executing that over the next few years, the 27 through 30 funds, with one of the first projects kind of go to construction over the next few months being the Wadsworth and 6th Avenue interchange reconstruction. So, and our STIP was approved as mentioned. And then I was going to mention the item that Director Rex mentioned, but he beat me to it. So I know DRCOG is excited, but we do appreciate the collaboration with the region and ongoing. So that's all I have to report tonight, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. There is no report from RTD tonight, so we will just notice that August 19th is our next meeting together. I appreciate everybody. Is there anything before we leave? Oh, parking. Get out of jail. Yes, Director Vaughn.
This live? Yeah. It's really an open question to everyone in the room. I'm from Golden. We continue to have problems with noisy cars and motorcycles. And so, yeah. So I was wondering, everyone in the room, if anyone has any experience with noise cars in the same way we have radar cars for speeding, or any solutions to traffic noise, particularly cars and motorcycles that have enhanced mufflers. If they could just let me know. Again, you don't have to sit here now and talk about it, but if you could, feel free to reach out, please.
Thank you very much. On that note, we are adjourned at 8:31. Thank you, everyone.